I am so excited today because we have a special guest that is a best-selling author. She published her first book at the age of 60, proving that age is no barrier to success. I am talking about the wonderfully talented Beryl Crosher-Segers. She doesn't hold back today. She talks about the tragic death of her brother when he was only 4 years old, and her life journey overcoming anxiety, racial prejudice, and segregation in South Africa. We also talk about her journey from, producing live events through to becoming a successful author and then a film producer. So, we get to cross over those creative fields. Now, Beryl is the author of the best-selling book, A Darker Shade of Pale. And that's a memoir of apartheid South Africa, where she tells her story of her determination to rise above the injustice and inequality. Now, after the success of that book, she actually went on to create another release, Behind My Smile. Now, she's won a multitude of awards in her career. She is a proud Sydney grandmother who lives on the east side of Australia, and she has an amazing story to tell. You guys are in for a treat with the very creative Beryl Crosher-Segers. Hey there, I'm Josephine Lancuba, and you're listening to Business, Arts and All That Jazz. I've been immersed in the creative business world and performing arts industry for over 20 years. I know from experience that being an artist, a creative, or running a creative business can be a tough gig, but I'm here to tell you it's possible. I went from having $0 to my name and living below the poverty line, to then living paycheck to paycheck, to finally living a life of comfort, happiness, passion, and even stability. In this podcast, I peel back the curtain and share with you the ups and downs of my journey. Plus, I tap into the minds of creative industry experts to discover their paths to success. I know you have a spark inside of you, that little voice that tells you to reach for the stars. I want to help you step into your limelight, to have the courage to live a life you dream of, a life that you design. So get ready to be entertained and inspired as we talk business, arts, and all that jazz. Okay, welcome. We have Beryl Crosher-Segers on the show. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. We met such a long time ago. I never thought I'd sit with you on, doing a podcast. So,
I know. How are you coping during lockdown? How are you going?
It's tough. It's we 3 generations in one house, 1 man, 4 women, and a dog, and so it's quite a struggle, with all of us studying and working from home. It's 24/7 basically. It's as it is, it's wearing thin at the moment.
And to give some context, you're in Sydney like I am. So we're in week 9?
Week 9? Yeah, week 9. Yes.
You can even keep track anymore. It's just
I know.
Insane.
Yeah.
Now, like you mentioned, we actually did meet many moons ago. That was you were actually producing a musical theatre, co-op musical theatre production, a chorus line.
Yes.
I played the role of Sheila.
Yes.
And that's so crazy because what year was that?
Probably around 2010.
Yeah, we're talking over 10 years, right?
Ago. Yeah.
So much has changed since then. It's actually quite funny because I was a young actor at the time, and I do remember meeting you, and you were lovely, but obviously being an actor, and you were the producer lady.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, Beryl's here. I've got to, do my best. I've got to make an impression. Isn't it funny?
It was fun, and John Burden was, the director. He was really good to work with, and we've done a few things since then. But it was a dream for me. That was, theatre productions, all things I dreamed about when I, lived in South Africa under oppression. So to finally be able to do these things, I just ran with it. I just tried to do, and I still do today, still try and do as much as I can.
Yeah, what inspired you to get started? What was that first step into the creative industry, and what inspired you to take that first step?
Well, I grew up in that background. I did that on a small community scale in South Africa, just in our trying to uplift our community there. So
Mm.
that it was always in my blood to create. And I put my first backyard concert on at the age of 11. So I of course, in South Africa, things were very different. We didn't have those opportunities. We, um, were very deprived. And so coming to Australia, I came from that background, very connected with a lot of people who were like me, wanted to uplift the community. And suddenly here I am in Sydney. I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And I still wanted to do those things and just couldn't connect with the right people who had those similar ideals to what I had. So I tried on, did small things, kind of, met people, and get to know people. And one day I just decided I'm going to I'm going to open this community arts a network,
Mm.
and just blindly went into it. And I did it for a number of years, did a few productions, connected with a few people. And then I had this brainwave that I would bring previously disadvantaged artists, entertainers from South Africa to Australia.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
yeah, and again, no plan, no budget, just made it up.
Like every good
Just, yeah,
artistic project. Yeah,
yes,
no plan, no budget.
just made it up as I went along, and took huge risks. Fortunately, I had a good job that paid, I worked full time, and so I could take these risks that I did. And so I did that, planned that, bringing these artists out, collaborating with local artists here, and sort of built that up over the years. So I was always involved in something. I had to do something creative. And even at work, we'd have fundraisers for the Cancer Council, and I'd be the person getting entertainers, bringing people in. And so always that producer's role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do understand that. I mean, I'm a producer also. I understand that risk that comes with producing,
Yeah.
and you put so much into it, and
Yes.
without that guarantee of outcome. But I guess it comes from a place of love and passion.
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes too much. Sometimes I throw, as they say, caution to the wind. You just take that risk, and you don't know, there's no guarantee it's going to work. I built that up in our community, so I knew I had the South African community that supported the events, but it was never big enough to, it didn't grow so that I got the broader community involved.
Yeah.
And so it remained kind of a hobby. It remained that it was something I wanted to do for these people that would never bring them anywhere overseas. And this was their opportunity to come. And so, I guess that was my ultimate dream, to just do that, to provide those opportunities for them.
Well, you really did take a leap from being a hobbyist producer into being a best-selling author. You wrote A Darker Shade of Pale, and that was your best-selling hit.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the journey of writing that book in particular.
Yeah, so this was a high school dream for me to write, of course. When I told my parents I wanted to be a writer, they said, "What's a writer? Go and be a teacher or a nurse, or that's a real job," And so I wrote. I'm a Dear Diary girl, so always wrote, throughout my life. And coming to Australia, once our family grew, all my immediate family are here, my mother and, all my siblings. And so I felt then that I wanted to leave a legacy. I wanted them to know where they come from, where we come from, why we're here, what made us leave that country. Our future generations would know that, because we're on to our fourth generation here. And so that book, I became so determined to write that book. I didn't think broader than writing for this book for our family. When I wrote that, I had no idea that so many people would read my book. I sat in my study by myself, my words on the computer, just my memories, pouring them out in there. And it was only when I had to get an editor and, had to get a publisher and had to do all those things that I knew nothing about, that, I just wanted to write a book. And it was through meeting this editor that the book took shape.
And you do really tackle some quite heavy issues in the book as well.
Yeah, I do. I come, of course, I grew up under oppression. I knew no other life. And, until I, when I became a teenager, I thought that was normal for us to be segregated, by the color of our skin, or live in our own areas. I didn't know there was another life just on the other side of the bushes, on the other side of the railway line, that children like me were living privileged lives. Because we were all segregated.
When did you discover that? When did you discover
I discovered
that life wasn't as you thought?
Well, I grew up in a household where my father was very vocal, very political. My mother was practical. My mother was the breadwinner. I grew up in the 60s with having my father at home because of ill health. So he took care of us. And my mother was the breadwinner. So he would say these things. We were, of course, very young. And he would, always be telling us about the injustice. So you grow up in that household where you learn about the injustice, but you don't really understand. And we had teachers, especially when I got to high school, our teachers would, tell us about these things. We were kept, as they said, dumb at the time. We had no television, no media. We didn't know what was happening in the rest of the world. But my father was very much interested in world affairs, and he had, he met people. He was well read. Of course, lots of books were banned. This book, A Darker Shade of Pale, back then would have been banned.
Yes.
When a journalist said that to me, when I went over to South Africa to launch the book, and he said to me, do you realize that this book would have been banned, back in...
it's crazy to think that, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I grew... So when of course, in my teens, you realize there's something different. And, my sister was older, and so you sort of venture out of your areas because you have to now go, and you see the injustices, you see the schools and how different their schools look to ours, and, their houses, and everything is just so much better than ours. So that's what I wanted to write about. I wanted our future generations to know that, it's, even though a lot of people say it's history, it's my history, it's our history.
Absolutely. And you don't want to be burying that. You want to be sharing that, because people can learn from your experiences, your history. Just like anyone else that shares their past, whether it be tainted or not. I think those are the stories that make a true impact. So they are the most important stories to tell.
And there were people, some of my trolls, people who...
Funny, I was about to get to that next. I was going to be asking you about that backlash. You did receive some of that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, because they felt that I was, reopening old wounds and, even death threats. They were wishing me ill, wishing my family ill. And this was just a book, a family. It's really a family story, but of course it's woven, the growing up under oppression and the injustices, of course, it's such a big part of our life. So I felt I really struggle. And it's something that I had to work through with a professional, is that I really struggled with people, people who were my age, who were privileged, and today they say that they didn't know. They say, as I said, that I didn't know that there was injustice. Neither did they. And so
Right.
I really struggle with that,
Yes.
that they say, when they say that. So yeah, I was very, verbally attacked, and just received the most horrific messages and images,
That's insane.
and it really, affected me. I didn't think it would. My book, of course, on Amazon and wherever, it did really well. And still today, it's, from time to time, if I make an appearance anywhere, if I'm on a panel, my book sales would go up. So yeah, that was it. Was really, for me, a personal achievement to write that book and to get to that stage where it's published and it's out there. And
Yeah, and you got published at 60.
I
Isn't
know,
that amazing?
It's,
Right?
yeah. It's, when I got the offer, I was shouting. I was like a teenager. What is something
Oh, that's fantastic.
a publisher is sending me a contract, and this never happened to me. It would never have happened had we stayed back there. Of course, things are different there now, and people's lives have changed there as well.
Yeah.
But if I look at my life and my time, and how much I missed out on. So when I came to Australia, I ran with everything. My first job, I came, growing up in South Africa, we couldn't work in the public service. Those jobs were all for white South Africans. I could not even touch the fence of Parliament House, or, and yeah, I found my very first job. I found myself working in the New South Wales Cabinet Office. I got a temporary job for 3 weeks. I stayed 17 years.
Wow.
And
You have another job at the moment, or you're
so now I'm freelance. Well,
yeah.
I'm back. I work part-time for a politician now as well. So I came into that job no government experience. I had qualifications, of course, from going to college and getting those qualifications, but I had no experience in government. And here I was offered this part-time role, admin role, and 3 weeks later I was offered a job, and I never went.
That's amazing. It's funny as well. Like, I think these days, especially in the world of the internet and personal branding and all these things, everybody thinks they can write a book, right? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes,
every entrepreneur and their dog thinks,
Yeah.
I'm going to write a book. I mean, heck, I've thought about writing a book. Tell us about the reality of that. What is it like to be a published author, and what's the demand, or what's the workload like?
Look, as I said, I'm a Dear Diary girl, so I had lots of stories that I wrote, because I grew up in the time where children were seen, and not heard. So I'd sit and listen to all the conversations. I'd write, we had nothing to do. I'd write these conversations, and I kept all my writing. And I used to make my own little books when I was a teenager. I used to, dream about writing, and I'd make my own little books and stitch the do my own binding and
Oh,
give
that's
it to my
amazing.
siblings. And um, so you can imagine when I held my first book, what that was like, that eventually at my age here I made it. But it was my determination to actually, achieve this dream that I had. I felt I needed to make it work. I needed to, to realize this dream. I had these bits of paper all over the place, but I had to form the story. But as I said earlier, it was only when I met this editor by chance in a group, in a writing group, and she, without her, I would have struggled to actually, to put the story together. I didn't have the skills to do that. I could write, but I and I had no structure. I didn't know those things. I was never taught to to write professionally. I taught myself. I just loved writing. And
how long did it take you to write that book?
It took me a while, like a number of years, but it really took me 2 years of full-time writing to finish it.
Yeah, wow.
To actually make it into a book.
Yeah. Hear that, all the aspiring writers out there. It's not just, I want to write a book. There's a lot of work involved.
It's a lot of work. And mainly because that was my first book and I had a lot to learn. The second book, I had been through that process. And so
we're talking now about Behind My Smile.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So the reason for that book is, it came after my first book. I went through this very difficult period when I was really badly affected by trolls, and the whole trauma of writing about growing up in South Africa was very hard. I was warned by other writers, but I thought, I can do this. I'm strong. But it did take its toll on me, writing, going back, because there were some family things. My brother drowned, some of our own family stories that I wrote about in there, and also the injustices. At my first job in South Africa, straight out of college, I was the only person of color in this company or in the office, and I don't know if you've seen that movie, Hidden Figures. That is a real trigger for me. Those NASA ladies, who worked at NASA. When I watch that movie, it's a real trigger for me. I was very young, working in this office, and I could not put my cup on the same table as the other people. I couldn't have tea or coffee with them. I couldn't go. They'd go on lunches, and I'd be excluded because I couldn't go to the places. Or they'd have morning tea right there, and I would be sitting at my desk, and I could not socialize with them.
And it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was there any sort of, was it therapeutic in a way, or was it just drawing out that trauma?
It was hard to write some of those things. Some days I had to walk away and just leave it. It was very difficult. Some of those things were really tough to write about. And I'd also built up this life here that I, of course, engaged with all South Africans through my community work here. And at times I did feel people are only friends with me because I'm an author or because I do these shows, or do they really want to know me? So I had those doubts about those relationships, and it was quite traumatic for me. I'm an overthinker as well, sort of. That's my personality. So
as most creatives are, I think.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
you've got
So
to overthink.
I'd always be questioning a lot of things, and and that was to my detriment. I actually made it worse for myself. And I really took to heart some of the comments that people were saying, and I was sending me and wishing my family ill, and I felt this pain that I was exposing my family to this as well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'd never told them. I didn't want to tell them, that all these things were coming. And I also grew up in a time where um, when natural healing, traditional healing was a thing. We didn't have, the Western medicine as much. Um, my mother and her sisters and our neighbors, there was always a wise person in the community. We didn't have psychologists or psychiatrists. They were the people that healed you. My mother was a healer. People used to come to her she was like a psychologist to women. And so I grew up, and when I got to the stage where things started happening to me, I had all these accidents. I started believing that people were cursing me because I went out to a shop, and I tripped and I go crashing into the glass, tore my Achilles on the couch for 3 months. I just recovered from that. I go for a walk, and a piece of metal shot into my eye,
Oh
and I
my
can't why.
goodness.
And and so all those
Jesus.
things happening, I just started believing that people could curse me. Something happened in my mind, that um, and I got to the stage where I couldn't leave my home. I couldn't drive my car. I didn't want to see people. I became fearful I never thought, the kind of person that I am, that this would happen to me. So it was a real struggle. But I realized that I needed help. And I, eventually went to the doctor and, had to go and find a professional. And I discovered this person who merged traditional healing with clinical
Right.
treatment. And so I was very fortunate to find this person. And so I saw him professionally, and while undergoing the treatment, I decided to write Behind My Smile, and to talk about that journey of healing. And it's a very open and honest account of my therapy and my thoughts and my fears, and that's how that book came about.
Wow. It's almost like the tortured artist,
Yes. Yeah.
We do tend to go there really all the way, and connect with whatever story we're telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can imagine that I mean, obviously I can't imagine it, but I can see how that may have affected you quite deeply to actually go there and relive those moments,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think my therapy helped a lot with unburdening myself, and letting go of some of these things. I struggled a lot with grief. I lost 3 siblings, and we are a very close family. And so I struggled with that, and I'm one of those long grieving people. So that was a big thing that I had to work through. And
well, there's no manual to grief,
no, there isn't. And there's no end. There's no end to it. My brother drowned. He was 4 and I was 6 years old, and I'm still haunted by that day. He drowned in front of us. So
that just made me think, because my son is 4, and that just choked me up just then,
Yeah,
just even thinking about
yeah,
that as a concept, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I wrote a chapter in A Darker Shade of Pale on him, and it's like I had to let go of. It's so detailed, and all the reviews I've had is about the detail in the book. And you know, that for me was therapeutic. It was healing
Yes.
because it's things that you just carry with you and images that are stuck there. And we never had therapy. There's nothing. No one even talked to us about my parents. Didn't talk to us. They had their own grief and never talked to us about my brother's death. He was gone from one day to the next. And my mom, I mean, we were on a picnic when it happened, and we were all right there when he drowned. He disappeared. And so that I struggled with for a long time.
So, and it's interesting because you've gone to this completely different path. So you've gone from writing these books, and you're writing a third one at the moment, to going into producing a documentary with such a different topic. Tell us about this documentary, because that's quite heavyweight as well.
I have a documentary that's called Healing from the Shadows, which came out of the books, which is in production, in post-production. But my fight, I'm a co-producer on that.
Right.
So the person, so the producer, of that film, it's really his idea. I came on as a co-producer in that.
What is my doc about?
So it's about a local young man who became addicted to drugs. He had his own. I was actually just writing the whole synopsis today, and he struggled with fitting in. He came from a family, a split family, and so he struggled with fitting in, and was bullied at school and fell into the wrong crowd where they made him feel welcome. He said, when I listened to his story, how it was so much better than what the bullies offered. These were the wrong people, but they made him feel good. They made him feel welcome.
And he fell into an addiction. Was it
one of the
ice, or what was it?
Ice.
That's
one of the most dangerous drugs. And so the director and producer of this film, he tells the story so beautifully in there. He says he's also the one who filmed my documentary, Healing from the Shadows, which is co-written by the professional that I saw. So my fight is, I'm just really proud to be part of this project, because the young man involved, he's very honest and very open about his struggle, and his road to recovery was also very hard. And he's won the fight, but he's still in the battle. And he turned to boxing after, a stint one of several stints in rehab. He came out and he went to a boxing ring and, joined a local boxing group. And that gave him some purpose and some stability in his life. And he had this new focus. And so he's boxing, and but he's still, he's not, he's not sure that he's out of the woods.
Yeah. And how did you even end up here? So you've gone from, producing live shows, events, then you become this, successful published author, and then you begin producing documentaries.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Was it intentional, or it kind of fell together?
It's the people you meet. And I met someone who said to me, why don't you make a documentary of your life, of your books that you wrote? And it was someone that worked at the ABC and who said to me, just, why don't you do that? You've got the two books. It was just like the next step.
Yeah.
I've never done it before. And so because I'm so goal driven, I've always been this way. And I like to see a project through to the end. And that's sort of one of the, I guess, the qualities that I have that's seen me progress in my work, in my jobs that I have. And
it's just crazy to me that like you really just go for it. So
I do.
There's a bit of a blind faith there, and you're like, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm going to go for this. You've got big dreams, and you absolutely don't hesitate.
Yeah, I don't. But I think at the same time, I've always had another source of income. And so I didn't just go into business and not have anything. I built it up like that. And that worked for me, is that, having that stable source of income and then taking these risks and building other.
Yeah, I would love to ask. I mean, this is like a creative business podcast after all. So,
is
it sustainable financially to be an author, to be a producer in Australia? Like, is there an abundance of finances, or is it not so? Like, what is it that so people out there that are thinking of these lines of work get a bit of a reality of what that might look like?
Yeah, it's, I think, more and more today. As I said, I was very surprised to get my first, book taken by a publisher, and it was a small publisher, nothing, big, but it got my book out there. Yeah. It would never have gotten out there. Yeah. I think today it's very, unless you a name, a big name, or it's very, from my own experience, it's very difficult to get a publisher interested in your book. Like anything you do, like anything that's out there, it's like making a record or, recording a song and then going to the record company. You're one of how many people, doing that. But I think for me was working with an editor, with a reputable editor. It was worth doing that, to getting my book up to a certain level. I think with the second book, it's another small publisher, but I had built up this platform for myself that made me marketable. So I had, and that I've done over a number of years, and through my event work, through my community work. Without that, I think publishers look at that, and if they see that you're marketable, that especially if you're an unknown, that's part of your package. That's part of what you present to them. Is you come with some platform to them.
And what do you think about self-publishing versus having a publisher?
I to be honest, I would self-publish unless I get a really good contract from someone.
Why is that?
Well, unless there's some really big money being put there, from a publisher. There's a lot of, from what I've heard from people, from others who have gone through publishers, they would get an advance, and that would be the only money that they see, because they would have to pay back that advance to the publisher. They take their money back. It's like being signed by a label. They invest in you. If you have a platform and you want to do that work of marketing yourself, and I do that a lot, getting book talks, getting myself, because that's a way of getting your books sold, going to libraries, going to book clubs. That's where people actually buy your book, especially if you're not known. That's a way of, if a bookstore had to call me and say, we want you to come and do a book signing, How many people would be there, But if I go to an organized book club, or there will be a certain number of sales, and or doing any talks, any,
Yeah, so that
going,
PR circuit and
you've
being
got to
really
do that.
active.
Yeah, you've got
Yeah.
to, you cannot publish your book and sit back.
No.
You've got to do that work,
Yeah, so
and
the work is not just in the writing, it's in everything after. Because as good as your book may be, if no one sees it, then you're not making the impact that you had hoped when you first wrote it.
Yeah. And even for the publisher, it's a huge risk, because they would, you would get published, you do that circuit of, PR, going out there, and then what then? That's over. You've done the, all the interviews, and you've done the radio, and what then? You cannot just do that. It's an ongoing thing. So it's important to have that platform there, that you've got a certain number of people that will buy your book, and through them other people will buy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
okay. And do you see yourself, Beryl, as a business? Now, I ask this because a lot of artists and creatives, they don't, but you come from a business background. Do you see yourself, the writer, as a business, or not? This is a passion project.
I see it as a passion project. I think to see it as a business, I'd have to publish a lot more books.
Yeah.
And, I can't do it on 2 books. I'd have to build that. And I think for me, Beryl Crosher-Segers, it's very difficult to have that niche. I like doing a lot of things. I cannot just be an author. Yeah. I've got to have, all these other things that go with it. I don't see that for myself. I don't see that I'm an author. I see I wear all these other hats. I'm a songwriter. That I fell into songwriting, met the right person, because I wanted to write a song for my documentary, Healing from the Shadows. And I met the singer-songwriter, and since then we've collaborated, and it's just grown. And
I actually understand that, because I mean, for me, look, I facilitate, theatrical programs for young people. I have my talent agency, so representing artists, but really those are my businesses. But when I write music, and like I recently produced a children's music video, Star in Your Heart, and that to me didn't feel like business. I had considered making it into a business, and then I realized I actually didn't want to. I just wanted to create that project, and I've released it since. And to be honest, I don't push it like I do with my businesses. Like, I don't have the big marketing campaigns and all the things that you're supposed to do, because I don't want to do that for that particular thing. So when it comes to the art, sometimes, I get that it, you can make it a business, or you can opt into just doing it because you love it. And sometimes you do need to differentiate between the two and make a call on that. It doesn't mean you're not going to promote it actively and do all the things, but you're not there like paying for Facebook ads to promote the book, or going that extra mile. You can just sit back and go, I've done some really good work, and people have connected.
I was just going to say, part of my, this is was part of my therapy, is that I have this busyness addiction, and it's that has helped me to cope with my anxiety and panic disorder that I developed when my brother drowned, and it was left untreated. So for me, that was a coping mechanism, to always be busy and always doing something. So it is an addiction for me. That's why people get tired when they talk to me. They say, you make us tired, with everything that you're doing. We can't keep up with it.
I can totally I can resonate with that. Don't worry. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Even my husband today said it. He's like, "Oh my
Yeah,
God, Joe, can you just?" I think it was something like 7 o'clock in the morning, and he's making a coffee, and I started talking about all the things, and he literally is like,
yeah,
"Joe,
yeah,
can you just stop?" Um,
yeah,
I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
okay." He's like, just, I don't want to talk about it. It's 7 o'clock. I'm making a coffee, Like, okay, fine. But yeah, no, I
Oh,
get that.
yeah, we had that conversation on Sunday, on a Sunday morning, and it became such a big issue that because I don't see it, that
Yeah.
I'm always busy. I don't see it. It's the way my brain works, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I had sent this documentary, My Fight, to a contact of mine in the US who's really big in the movie world. And so he wrote back, he gave his feedback. And I was so excited when I saw that. I contacted the filmmaker, the executive producer, and I said, oh, this is the feedback. And we were on the phone back and forth, and you know um, and that became my Sunday morning. And my husband was saying to me, when do you stop? When do you ever stop? you know um,
You don't need to
because
stop, Beryl. You got to go with it. I think you shouldn't have to suppress that energy. I understand
yeah,
like being a bit considerate of the people around you, whatever, but you shouldn't have to suppress that energy because it's such a
yeah,
beautiful energy to have, And
yeah,
and when you meet like-minded people, they totally get it, but there's not
yes,
many.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So tell me, what's next for Beryl? What's next for you?
Well, I'm writing my third book. It's my first attempt at a fiction.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it's a psychological thriller, and I'm fortunate to have this editor who's really, I mean, she's just great to work with.
yeah, yeah.
So I completed a postgraduate studies in creative writing at my age of 60. And
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm still waiting to graduate. Lockdown.
Oh,
My mom will be 91. I would love her to see me graduate. So, I'm just hoping that eventually that moment will arrive. And so when I did the course, I met up with someone on the course, and we um, got talking about this story, and that's where I developed the story as part of my thesis. And just now I'm actually writing that story.
wow. That's
um,
very different.
yeah, it is, because I'm a non-fiction writer.
Yeah.
And so even though it's I still use some real life things, but it is fiction. It's very different for me to write that, because I'm such an honest writer and very open when I write about myself. I'm now having to write about these characters that I don't know and that
Yeah.
I'm making up.
So tell me, where can people find out about, your books and what's happening? Do you have a website or something you'd like to share?
Yep. Yep. So my books are, of course, all available online at all the online, the usual, Amazon,
And that's
Booktopia,
A Darker
all
Shade of
those.
Pale and Behind My
And
Smile.
yes, so they're all available there. And I also have a website, Beryl Segers Chronicles. I actually started a company. I registered a company because I needed to put all these things under one umbrella. I just had all these, tentacles going everywhere.
As creatives
So
do, as creatives do. All
yeah,
right. Well,
so
we'll pop those links in the show
yeah,
notes for you. And so, if
yeah,
anyone's interested or they want to check out, your website,
yeah,
we can definitely pop that in the show notes for everyone. Well, I just want to
yeah.
say a big, big thank you for coming on and chatting with me. It was lovely to catch up. It's been too
Thank
long.
you. I know, I
And I'm
know.
loving that you're also a fellow redhead dreamer. That's amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. And
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening and would like to hear more, be sure to click subscribe. If you're really feeling the love, share us with your friends. To work with me or to simply find out more about the magic of creativity, arts and business, head to my website josephinelancuba.com, and you can find me on socials. I also have a book that I've co-written with a bunch of amazing entrepreneurial women called The Women Changing the World, and you can grab a copy of that at josephinelancuba.com/books. Thanks for listening.